You are the same man you were last year. Not because life has been unkind to you, though perhaps it has. Not because your circumstances have conspired against you, though perhaps they have. But because you have been doing the same things in the same order with the same habits of thought day after day and expecting a different outcome from the one you have always received. That is not a criticism. That isn't a criticism. It is a diagnosis. And a diagnosis is only useful if it's toward a cure. I have spent 50 years in the study of why certain men become unrecognizable within a short season, transformed in bearing, in results, in the quality of opportunity that finds them, while other men of equal intelligence and equal desire remain precisely where they were, with nothing but more detailed explanations for why the world has not cooperated with their intentions. The difference is not genius, it is not circumstance, it is not fortune. It is a small number of daily practices sustained without exception for 90 days, which are sufficient by the operation of a law of nature, that genius nor ignorance can prevent, to transform the operating condition of a man's mind so completely that the people who knew him before will not recognize that he has become. I have verified this in the lives of more than 500 men I have studied at close range. And in this hour, I am going to tell you exactly what those practices are and why they work. Part 1. Write it, sign it, read it twice a day. The act that separates the man who has a direction from the man who has none. I want to begin with a plain statement of fact, and I want you to hold it in your mind as the foundation upon which everything else in this hour is built. 95 of every 100 people I have analyzed in the course of my life's work had no written, definite, major purpose. 95 and 100, not the majority, not merely most 95. They had occupations, they had wishes, they had complaints about why the wishes had not materialized. But they did not have what every great achiever in the history of commerce and industry had in common: a written, specific, emotionally charged, daily reviewed declaration of precisely what they intended to accomplish and precisely what they intended to give in exchange for it. The absence of that written statement is not a minor gap in a man's philosophy. It is the gap. It is the explanation for why a man of genuine intelligence and genuine desire remains in the same station for a decade, while a man of lesser natural endowment rises past him, not because of luck. Not because of favorable connection, but because one man had told his subconscious mind precisely what to pursue, and the other had given it nothing precise to work with at all. The subconscious mind cannot act upon vague instructions. No more than an architect can build a house from a statement that the owner wants something larger than what he presently has. The subconscious mind is your architect. I want to pause for a moment and just speak to you, not as a channel, but as a friend, because something happened that I can't let pass by quietly. There are now 300,000 of us here. 300,000 people who decided this little corner of the world was worth their time. When I started, I could never have pictured a number like that. And honestly, it's not the number that gets me. It's the thought of 300,000 real lives, each of you on your own road, choosing to walk a part of it with me. I don't take that lightly for a single second. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. I'm grateful for every one of you. Oh, and if you still haven't grabbed the free auto-suggestion sheet, go do that. I really think it could help you. It's down in the description. It requires a blueprint-specific, detailed, written, and repeatedly presented before it can begin the work of bringing about the conditions its owner has described. And it will do that work. That is what makes this practice so powerful and so thoroughly verifiable in the lives of men who have applied it. Once the subconscious mind receives a definite instruction clearly stated and repeatedly delivered with emotional force, it goes to work on that instruction with a thoroughness that the conscious mind could never match. It organizes, it perceives connections the conscious mind would overlook. It draws toward the man the specific people, plans, and circumstances that his stated purpose requires, not through any mechanism that defies the laws of nature, but through exactly the laws of nature. operating in the specific and dependable way that everyone who has tested them has found them to operate. Let me tell you about a man who came to my office in one of the worst conditions I have ever seen a man bring himself to. He had been a manufacturer of modest success until the events of the First Great War had cut off his supply of raw materials and destroyed his business with it. He had lost his money. He had left his wife and children. He had wandered without aim or purpose until he had reached a condition in which the most conspicuous feature of his face was not poverty, but defeat. The deep, settled inward defeat of a man who has decided somewhere below the level of his conscious thought that he is finished. He had read something I had written. He said that some thought in what he had read convinced him there was a man in my office who could help him. I looked at him, the glassy eyes, the lines of discouragement, carved by years of undirected suffering into his face, the 10 days' worth of beard, the nervous, collapsing posture. And I doubted deeply that there was anything I could do for him, but I did not say so. I asked him to sit and tell me his story. When he had finished, I said to him, "There is nothing I can do for you." He went pale. He sank to him, "There is nothing I can do for you." He went pale. He sank in his chair. He had come a very long way to hear a sentence that confirmed what he already feared. Then I said, "But there is a man in this building to whom I will introduce you if you wish, who can put you back on your feet again." He rose from the chair and grabbed my hands and said, "For God's sake, lead me to this man." I took him by the arm and led him down the corridor to a room where I conducted my character analyses. Against one wall, concealed by a curtain, was a tall looking glass, floor to ceiling. I pulled the curtain aside. I pointed my finger at the glass and I said, "There stands the man to whom I promised to introduce you. There is the only man in this world who can put you back on your feet. And unless you sit down and become acquainted with that man, as you have never been acquainted with him before, you might just as well have stayed where you came from, because no one else can do for you what that man can do, and he will not do it until you know him better than you have ever known him." He stepped toward the glass. He rubbed his hands across his bearded face. He studied himself from head to foot. Then he stepped back, dropped his chin to his chest, and wept. I knew then that the lesson had gone in. I sent him away. A few days later, I was walking through the streets of Chicago when I encountered a man walking with such briskness, such elevation in his carriage, such unmistakable evidence of a man who has recently removed himself that I nearly passed him before I recognized who he was. His transformation had been so complete that I did not immediately know his face. He stopped me. He said, "I went out the very day I left your office by any reasonable description, and I sold myself at a salary of $3,000 a year. My employer advanced me money for clothes. He advanced money for my family. I am back on the road." It seems like a dream when I think that only a few days ago I had lost hope and faith and courage entirely. That man eventually became the president of the largest concerns of its kind in the country, with operations extending from coast to coast. What changed? Not his intelligence. It was the same intelligence he brought to my office. Not his experience. It was the same experience that had watched his first business collapse. Not his network, not his resources, not the economic conditions of the city he returned to. What changed was this. He had been introduced for the first time genuinely to himself, to the man that existed beneath the beard and the defeat and the accumulated weight of years of undirected suffering. And from that introduction, a new purpose emerged. And from that purpose, a written declaration was made. And from that declaration, a new dominating thought took up residence in the operating machinery of his mind. And the machinery began, as it always does, to work in the direction of what it was given to work upon. Now, I want to give you plainly and without ornament the practice that makes this possible, the specific daily act that this man performed, and that every man who has transformed himself within a short season has performed in one form or another. Write your definite chief aim. Not a summary, not a phrase on the back of an envelope. a full, clear statement of what you intend to accomplish, in what amount, by what specific date, and in exchange for what specific service you intend to render. These are not ceremonial details. Each one serves a specific function in the mechanism by which the subconscious mind receives and acts upon your instructions. The amount, because the subconscious mind cannot organize effort toward a vague destination. The date, because a decision without a deadline is a wish with formal clothing. The service, because the law that governs the universe does not dispense prosperity on the basis of desire alone. It requires an exchange. And the man who has named clearly what he will give is a man who can act, while the man who has not named it is still waiting for terms that will suit him. When you have written this statement, sign it. The act of signing is the act of personal commitment. The moment at which the statement passes from a general aspiration into a specific contract between you and the person whose name is at the bottom. That person is the only person in any position to enforce it. Make the contract with him deliberately and with full awareness of what you are agreeing to. Commit it to memory. Not because recitation has magic. Commit it to memory. Not because recitation has magic in it, but because a statement that lives only on paper has not crossed from the conscious to the automatic. A statement that has been committed to memory has begun to take up residence in the subconscious, and the subconscious can now begin to act upon it. Then read it aloud, morning upon arising and before retiring with feeling. I want to emphasize feeling because it is the one element that most men discard as impractical. And it is the one element without which the entire practice is more than a man reading a piece of paper to him. The subconscious mind is not moved by words alone. It responds to ideas infused with genuine emotion. Words spoken without feeling are like letters that have been written and addressed but never mailed. They exist, but they never reach their destination. The subconscious accepts and acts upon thoughts that are backed by conviction, emotion, and the vivid sensation of already possessing what is desired. When you read your written goal, do not treat it as a hopeful wish. Read it as a declaration of certainty. Experience the feeling that the outcome already belongs to you, and that reality is simply catching up with a decision your mind has already made. This is how habits are formed. Each repetition deepens a mental pathway. The first repetition requires effort. The 10th begins to feel familiar. By the 90th, a new pattern has become firmly established. Eventually, the goal no longer depends on constant motivation because the habit itself carries the individual forward. The process is straightforward, though not always easy. In the beginning, it demands actions that oppose old patterns of thinking and behavior. Yet simplicity should never be mistaken for weakness. The most powerful principles are often the simplest. The challenge rarely lies in understanding them. It lies in applying them consistently. Write your goal tonight. Do not wait for perfect circumstances or complete confidence. The act of writing is the first promise you keep to yourself. Every time you review that statement, you reinforce that promise. Over time, those repeated acts of self-commitment become the foundation of a completely transformed person. The man who stood before the mirror and confronted himself did nothing extraordinary. He simply honored one commitment each morning and another each evening. After 90 days, those commitments became part of his identity. The person who emerged was so different that the discouraged man in the mirror would hardly have recognized him. Now consider the second practice. 30 minutes each day devoted to deliberate thought about the person you intend to become. This principle was used by some of history's most successful achievers. Its name is concentration, not the forced strain of trying to overpower the mind, but the disciplined ability to keep attention fixed on a single purpose until that purpose becomes clear and actionable. Every person concentrates naturally on matters that truly capture their attention. The difference is that successful individuals direct this ability toward their future identity. 30 focused minutes each day, sustained over 90 days, can create remarkable clarity, purpose, and momentum. As stated in the self-confidence formula, I realize that the dominating thoughts of my mind will eventually express themselves in action and become reality. Therefore, I will devote 30 minutes each day to thinking about the person I intend to become, creating a clear mental image of that person in my mind. During those 30 minutes, think specifically. Imagine how that future version of yourself behaves, speaks, works, decides, and responds to challenges. See how he handles pressure, uses his time, treats others, and pursues his objectives. Make the picture detailed and vivid. Find a quiet place. Relax completely. Close your eyes. Bring your definite chief aim to mind and visualize. Relax completely. Close your eyes. Bring your definite chief aim to mind and visualize yourself already living it. This is not daydreaming. It is the disciplined use of imagination directed toward a specific objective. Over time, the mind begins to follow this image naturally. What starts as conscious effort gradually becomes habit, and once habit takes hold, transformation accelerates. If your goal involves financial success, picture yourself already possessing the money. See how you earn it, manage it, invest it, and use it. Make the experience as real as possible in your imagination. The clearer and more emotionally charged the image becomes, the more powerfully it influences the subconscious mind and directs your actions toward its realization. Even a limited association with ambitious, disciplined, and purposeful people can begin to reshape the direction of your thinking when maintained consistently over time. The influence of the people around you is rarely dramatic in a single moment, but over months, it becomes one of the strongest forces in determining the quality of your dominant thoughts. Your environment is not limited to the people you meet in person. The books you read, the conversations you listen to, the content you consume, and the ideas you repeatedly expose yourself to all become part of the mental atmosphere in which your character develops. Every message that enters through your eyes and ears contributes in some measure to the thoughts that eventually dominate your mind. A person who regularly studies the words and experiences of accomplished individuals places himself in the company of minds organized around purpose, discipline, and achievement. He gains access to perspectives that elevate his own thinking. By contrast, a person who consumes information carelessly, seeking only distraction or constantly immersing himself in negativity, gradually conditions his mind to expect and focus on the very conditions he repeatedly observes. For the next 90 days, become selective about what enters your mind. Approach mental nutrition with the same care you would give to physical nutrition. Not from fear or rigidity, but from an understanding that today's repeated inputs become tomorrow's habits of thought. There is a simple truth that many people overlook. If your environment is not helping you grow, it must be changed. Waiting for ideal circumstances rarely produces change. Waiting for others to change first rarely produces change. The responsibility belongs to the individual. Those who transform themselves do not merely adopt new principles while remaining immersed in influences that constantly pull them backward. They deliberately build environments that support their goals. They seek new associations, expose themselves to better ideas, engage in different conversations, and remove influences that conflict with the future they are trying to create. As these changes accumulate, the environment itself begins to reinforce the new identity. The written goal becomes easier to believe. Concentrated thinking becomes easier to maintain. Progress begins to feel natural rather than forced because the surroundings are now aligned with the direction of growth. Guard the entrance to your mind carefully. Every influence you allow to enter contributes to the person you are becoming. Part 4. The daily habit of doing more than is required. One of the most valuable lessons in personal advancement comes from a principle that appears simple but produces extraordinary results when practiced consistently. Do more than you are asked to do. Years ago, while working in a position of modest responsibility, I was preparing to leave for the weekend when a lawyer entered the office looking for assistance with an urgent task. Everyone else had already left. Although I was under no obligation to stay, I chose to remain and help him complete the work. The task itself was not remarkable. What mattered was the attitude behind it. I viewed the opportunity not as an inconvenience, but as a chance to be useful. Months later, that same lawyer contacted me with an offer that increased my annual income significantly. The opportunity did not arise because I had requested it or negotiated for it. It arose because a single act of voluntary service created an impression of reliability and willingness that remained in his memory long after the work itself had been completed. Experiences like this taught me a principle that I later observed in countless successful individuals. The people who advance most rapidly are often those who consistently provide value beyond what is required. They do not limit their efforts to the minimum necessary standard. They develop a reputation for dependability, initiative, and contribution. One particular example illustrates this perfectly. A young employee began working in a large automobile company in a relatively minor role. He possessed no special title, no exceptional authority, and no obvious advantage over the many others employed there. However, he noticed something important. Each evening, after most employees left, the company's leader remained at work handling additional responsibilities. Instead of leaving with everyone else, the young man chose to stay. No one instructed him to do so. No one promised him a reward. He simply recognized that being available when needed created opportunities unavailable to those who were absent. Over time, his employer began turning to him whenever assistance was required. Small tasks led to larger responsibilities. Larger responsibilities created trust. Trust created greater opportunities. Step by step, he became one of the most dependable individuals in the organization. When asked how he had risen so quickly from such an ordinary starting point, his explanation was remarkably simple. He got into the habit of calling on me. Those 8 words reveal an important truth about opportunity. Advancement often begins long before a promotion, a contract, or a breakthrough appears. It begins with making yourself useful, dependable, and consistently available. Opportunity tends to favor the person who has established a reputation for service before the opportunity arrives. The individual who repeatedly contributes beyond expectations gradually becomes difficult to overlook, not because he demands attention, but because his actions steadily build a record of value that others come to trust. Over time, that reputation opens doors that force open. The principle works because opportunity rarely searches for the person who waits passively. Instead, it tends to arrive where value has been consistently demonstrated. A person who repeatedly contributes beyond expectations becomes the natural choice when greater responsibility, trust, or opportunity appears. This idea is often described as going the extra mile. Most people focus on the external rewards associated with this habit: promotions, recognition, income, influence. Yet the deeper benefit is internal. Each time you do more than is required, you send a message to yourself. You reinforce the belief that your contribution is not limited by your current title, salary, or circumstances. These actions become evidence that you are capable of more than your present situation reflects. Over time, those small acts accumulate. The mind begins to accept a new self-image. Confidence grows, not because of positive thinking alone, but because there is a growing body of proof created by your own behavior. You know what you are capable of because you have repeatedly demonstrated it to yourself. A simple practice can help develop this habit. Every day, find one useful action that no one requested, but that creates genuine value for someone around you. It does not need to be dramatic. In most cases, it will be small. The power comes from consistency, not size. One thoughtful email, one extra effort, one problem solved without being asked, one contribution made simply because it was needed. When repeated daily, these actions create a pattern that becomes part of your character. The individual act may seem insignificant, but the habit becomes powerful. Part 5, the 90-day promise. The final principle is not about goals, concentration, environment, or service. It is about something even more fundamental: keeping your word to yourself. Many people approach personal development by making large promises. They declare that they will transform their lives, change every habit, and become a completely different person. These commitments often fail because they are too broad and too ambitious to sustain. The more effective approach is much simpler. Choose one meaningful commitment that is specific enough to measure, small enough to complete even on difficult days, and important enough to matter. Then keep that commitment every day for 90 days without exception. The particular habit matters less than the consistency. What matters is building a record of promises kept. The relationship you have with your own word may be the most important relationship in your life. People often assume they lack motivation, discipline, or confidence. In reality, many struggle because they no longer fully trust themselves. They have made commitments in the past and abandoned them. They have started and stopped repeatedly. Over time, the mind begins to expect that future promises will be broken as well. Trust is not created by intention. It is created by evidence. Each day you keep a promise to yourself, you add another piece of evidence. Gradually, the expectation of failure begins to weaken. A new expectation forms, the expectation that when you say you will do something, you will follow through. This process is not dramatic, it is quiet. It develops one day at a time. Choose a single practice. Perhaps it is reading your written. Choose a single practice. Perhaps it is reading your written goal every morning and evening. Perhaps it is 30 minutes of focused reflection each day. Perhaps it is one daily act of service beyond what is required. Whatever you choose, define it clearly. Make it measurable. Remove ambiguity. Instead of saying, "I will be more positive," say, "I will spend 10 minutes each morning reviewing my written purpose." Instead of saying, "I will work harder," say, "I will complete one extra act of value for someone each day." Write the commitment down. Sign it. Record today's date and the date 90 days from now. Then begin. Keep the promise on the easy days. Keep it on the difficult days. Most importantly, keep it on the days when you do not feel like it. Those are the days that matter most because they strengthen the new habit far more than actions performed when motivation is abundant. After 90 days, take a moment to reflect on who you have become. The transformation may not be dramatic from the outside. Your appearance may be the same. Your circumstances may not have changed overnight. But something important will be different. You will possess a deeper trust in yourself. You will know from experience that your word means something. You will know that when you give yourself an instruction, there is a strong likelihood that you will follow it. That trust becomes the foundation for every larger achievement that follows. The truly transformed person is not someone who suddenly becomes extraordinary. It is someone who has rebuilt the internal conditions of success through consistent action, repeated daily, until discipline gradually becomes identity. That possibility exists for anyone willing to begin. The question is not whether change is possible. The question is whether you are willing to take the first step and continue taking it tomorrow and the day after that until the new path becomes your natural way forward. And when that new path becomes natural, something remarkable begins to happen. The effort that once felt exhausting starts to disappear. Not because the work itself has changed, but because the person performing the work has changed. What required discipline in the beginning now requires only continuation. The internal argument that consumed so much energy grows quieter. Decisions that once demanded debate are made almost automatically because they are now aligned with the identity that has been built through repetition. This is the point where many observers misunderstand what they are seeing. They look at the outward success of a man and assume that confidence produced the action. In reality, the action produced the confidence. The confidence came later. It was earned through hundreds of small demonstrations of reliability performed when no audience was present and no reward was guaranteed. Reliability performed when no audience was present and no reward was guaranteed. The world notices results. The subconscious mind notices evidence. Every morning you rise when you promised you would rise. Every page you read when you promised you would read. Every act of service you render when no one demanded it. Every session of concentrated thought you complete when action would have been easier becomes evidence. The subconscious mind collects that evidence with perfect accuracy. It does not care what you hope to become. It cares what you repeatedly prove. That is why the transformation accelerates after a period of consistency. At first, you are carrying the habit, then the habit begins to carry you. Eventually, the habit becomes part of your identity, and identity is the most powerful force in human conduct. A man can resist a task, he can postpone a goal, he can negotiate with a schedule, but he rarely acts against the person he can negotiate with a schedule, but he rarely acts against the person he believes himself to be. If he believes he is disciplined, he acts accordingly. If he believes he is reliable, he behaves accordingly. If he believes he is a creator of value, opportunities begin to appear because his conduct continuously supports that belief. For this reason, do not spend the next 90 days measuring your progress solely by external results. The promotion may not arrive immediately. The business may not expand overnight. The financial goal may still be in progress. Those things often lag behind the internal changes that produce them. Instead, measure something more important. Measure the degree to which your actions are becoming consistent with your declared purpose. Ask yourself each evening a simple question. Did I act today like the person I intend to become? Not perfectly. No man acts perfectly. The question is whether the general direction of your conduct is moving toward the future you have chosen. One honest answer to that question, repeated daily, will teach you more about your progress than any temporary success or setback. Remember that every significant achievement in human history existed first as a thought held consistently enough to become a plan, then an action, then a habit, and finally a result. The visible outcome was the final stage, not the first. Most people become discouraged because they judge themselves at the beginning of the process by standards that belong to the end. Do not make that mistake. Judge yourself by your faithfulness to the process. If you have written your purpose, continue writing. If you have committed to concentrated thought, continue concentrating. If you have chosen the extra, continue writing. If you have committed to concentrated thought, continue concentrating. If you have chosen the extra mile, continue serving. If you have made a promise, continue keeping it. The days will pass whether you use them or not. 90 days from now will arrive with the same certainty that tomorrow morning will arrive. The only uncertainty is the condition in which you will meet that day. One version of you will arrive there carrying the same explanations, the same frustrations, and the same unfinished intentions that exist today. Another version will arrive carrying a record of 90 days of directed thought, disciplined action, and promises kept. The distance between those two men is not measured in time. It is measured in decisions repeated long enough to become character. And character, once established, becomes destiny. So begin where you are. Begin before you feel fully prepared. Begin before confidence arrives. Begin before circumstances. Begin before you feel fully prepared. Begin before confidence arrives. Begin before circumstances become ideal. The purpose of these practices is not to reward perfection. Their purpose is to create it gradually through repetition. Take the first step today, then take it again tomorrow. Continue until the person you once hoped to become is no longer a future vision, but the living reality of your daily conduct. And when that day arrives, you will understand a truth that has changed the lives of every man and woman who has ever applied it faithfully. You do not transform your life in a single moment. You transform it one kept promise at a time. Form it one kept promise at a time. And once that understanding takes root, a new responsibility emerges. It is no longer enough to protect a habit. You must learn how to protect the standard that created the habit in the first place. Many men succeed for a season and then quietly surrender the very practices that produced their success because the first signs of progress convince them they no longer need the disciplines that carried them there. Nothing could be further from the truth. The practices that create advancement are the same practices that preserve it. The written purpose, the concentrated thought, the deliberate selection of influences, the habit of rendering more service than is required, and the keeping of one's word are not emergency measures designed only to rescue a man from difficulty. They are permanent principles. Their value increases as responsibility increases. The higher a man rises, the more dangerous neglect becomes. A small error in direction at the beginning can be corrected easily. The more dangerous neglect becomes. A small error in direction at the beginning can be corrected easily. The same error left uncorrected for years can carry a man far from the destination he originally intended to reach. This is why self-examination must become a regular practice. At least once each week, withdraw from activity long enough to ask yourself a series of honest questions. Am I still moving toward the purpose I chose? Have my daily actions remained consistent with that purpose? What habits have strengthened during the past week? What habits have weakened? Where have I allowed convenience to replace discipline? Where have I accepted mediocrity when excellence was available? These questions are not meant to produce guilt. They are meant to produce awareness. A ship reaches its destination because its course is corrected repeatedly throughout the voyage. A life is no different. Many people imagine that success is built through dramatic breakthroughs. No different. Many people imagine that success is built through dramatic breakthroughs. My observations have led me to a different conclusion. Success is more often the result of small corrections made consistently before problems become large enough to demand attention. The man who notices a decline in effort and corrects it immediately preserves momentum. The man who notices his reading habits deteriorating and restores them preserves growth. The man who notices negative influences entering his environment and removes them preserves clarity. The correction may seem insignificant in the moment, but over months it compounds into extraordinary results. This principle of accumulation works in both directions. A single neglected day appears harmless. A single missed commitment appears insignificant. A single compromise appears easy to justify. But habits are rarely destroyed by one large decision. They are usually weakened by a series of small permissions granted to oneself until the standard that once seemed firm becomes flexible and eventually disappears. Guard against this process. Do not negotiate with the standards that created your progress. Maintain them. Strengthen them. Allow them to become part. Maintain them. Strengthen them. Allow them to become part of your character. Eventually, there comes a point when the practices are no longer separate activities that must be remembered. They become expressions of who you are. Purpose becomes natural. Concentration becomes natural. Service becomes natural. Discipline becomes natural. At that stage, the external results begin to accelerate because there is no longer constant conflict between intention and action. The mind is unified. The purpose is clear. The habits support the purpose. The environment supports the habits, and the daily actions support the environment. Everything begins working in the same direction. That is the condition from which significant achievement is born. It is not a condition reserved for the gifted. It is not available only to those who begin with wealth, education, influence, or special advantages. It is available to any individual willing to govern his own thoughts with consistency and direct his actions with purpose. The law of thoughts with consistency and direct his actions with purpose. The law remains the same for everyone. Thought becomes habit. Habit becomes character. Character becomes destiny. The process cannot be rushed, but it can be trusted. Every day you continue the work, the foundation grows stronger. Every promise you keep adds another stone. Every disciplined action adds another layer. Every act of service expands your influence. Every hour of concentrated thought sharpens the image of the person you are becoming. And then one day, often without warning, you discover that the future version of yourself you once imagined is no longer in the distance. You are looking at him, not because of a single opportunity, not because fortune suddenly favored you, not because circumstances became perfect, but because day after day, when no one was watching, you deliberately became the person capable of creating the life you desired. That is the true power of 90 days. You deliberately became the person capable of creating the life you desired. That is the true power of 90 days properly used. Not that it changes everything around you immediately, but that it changes the one thing from which everything else eventually takes its direction, the condition of your own mind. And when the condition of the mind changes, the quality of every decision begins to change with it. This is the point at which many people become confused because the transformation is rarely dramatic from the outside. There is no trumpet announcing that a new chapter has begun. There is no sudden moment when the world stops and acknowledges the work that has been done. What changes first is perception. The man who has trained his mind begins to notice opportunities that previously passed unnoticed. He sees connections where others see isolated events. He recognizes value where others see inconvenience. Problems that once appeared as obstacles now appear as questions waiting for answers. The world itself has not changed. The observer has. And because the observer has changed, the world appears different. This principle explains why two people can stand in the same room, hear the same information, face the same conditions, and leave with entirely different futures. One sees limitation. The other sees possibility. One focuses on what cannot be done. The other immediately begins asking, what can be done? The difference is not intelligence alone. It is conditioning. The mind moves in the direction of its dominant habits. For years, perhaps decades, many men have unknowingly conditioned themselves to search for reasons why success is difficult, why opportunity is scarce, why progress is slow. Then they wonder why those conclusions seem to appear everywhere they look. The mind always finds evidence for the instructions it has been given. Give it a problem, and it will search for obstacles. Give it a purpose, and it will search for pathways. This is why your daily thoughts matter so much. They are not idle mental activity. They are instructions. Every repeated thought is a command issued to the subconscious. The command may be constructive or destructive, deliberate or accidental, but it is being recorded all the same. A man who repeatedly tells himself that he lacks opportunity eventually stops looking for it. A man who repeatedly tells himself that he is capable of growth begins unconsciously searching for ways to grow. The law operates whether he understands it or not. For this reason, guard not only your actions, but also the language you permit yourself to use. Words are often the visible expression of invisible beliefs. Listen carefully to your own conversations. Listen to the explanations you give for your successes and failures. Listen to the assumptions hidden inside your ordinary statements. You may discover that many of the limitations you have accepted are nothing more than habits of thought repeated so often they began to sound like facts. Challenge those assumptions. Examine them honestly. Ask whether they are objectively true or merely familiar. Many of the walls that seem permanent are supported by little more than repetition. Once the mind begins questioning them, their strength diminishes. Then something important happens. Energy that was previously consumed by doubt becomes available for action. Energy that was wasted on internal conflict becomes available for creation. Energy that was invested in defending limitations becomes available for building possibilities. This is one of the hidden rewards of self-discipline. Most people think discipline costs energy. In reality, proper discipline conserves it. The undisciplined mind is constantly distracted, constantly conflicted, constantly reacting. The disciplined mind spends less time arguing with itself and more time moving forward. That forward movement creates momentum. Momentum is one of the most powerful forces available to a human being. A small action completed today makes tomorrow's action easier. Tomorrow's action strengthens the next day's action. Before long, progress begins generating its own encouragement. The man who once struggled to maintain a single positive habit now finds himself maintaining several. The man who once required motivation to begin now runs on routine. The man who once doubted every step now expects himself to continue. That expectation is significant. Expectations shape behavior. When a person expects himself to quit, quitting becomes easy. When a person expects himself to continue, continuing becomes natural. Build that expectation carefully over the next 90 days, not through wishes, not through promises spoken once and forgotten. Build it through evidence. Let every completed action become proof. Let every kept commitment become proof. Let every difficult day successfully navigated become proof. At the end of the process, the greatest reward may not be the money earned, the position attained, or the goals accomplished, valuable as those things may be. The greatest reward may be the discovery that you are capable of directing your own life deliberately, rather than allowing circumstances to direct it for you. Few discoveries are more valuable. Once a man learns that lesson deeply, he ceases to view himself as a victim of conditions. He becomes a creator of conditions. And from that moment forward, the future is no longer something that merely happens to him. It becomes something he helps shape through thought, decision, action, and persistence, repeated day after day, until the extraordinary becomes ordinary and the impossible becomes familiar. And when the impossible begins to feel familiar, a subtle danger appears that few men recognize until it has already slowed their progress. The danger is complacency. Success has a peculiar way of persuading a person that the effort which created it is no longer necessary. The mind begins to whisper that the habits can be relaxed, that the standards can be lowered just a little, that one missed day does not matter. One missed day rarely matters. What matters is the story that follows it. If the missed day becomes an exception, nothing is lost. If it becomes permission, everything begins to change. The strongest individuals are not those who never to change. The strongest individuals are not those who never stumble. They are those who refuse to build an identity around the stumble. They understand that consistency is not perfection. Consistency is the habit of returning to the purpose, returning to the standard, returning to the disciplines that produced growth in the first place. This understanding removes one of the greatest obstacles to long-term achievement: the tendency to abandon an entire plan because of a temporary lapse. The man who misses one morning of concentrated thought but returns the next day remains on course. The man who skips one reading of his written purpose but resumes the practice immediately remains on course. The man who has one unproductive week but refuses to surrender the larger objective remains on course. Progress belongs to those who continue, not those who begin perfectly. As the months pass, another change becomes noticeable: who continue, not those who begin perfectly. As the months pass, another change becomes noticeable. The individual who once depended heavily upon external encouragement finds himself relying less and less upon it. Praise becomes pleasant but unnecessary. Criticism becomes informative but not destructive. The center of motivation gradually shifts inward. This is one of the clearest signs of maturity. When your conduct is governed entirely by external approval, your direction changes whenever the opinions around you change. But when your conduct is anchored to a definite purpose and reinforced by daily habits, your direction remains stable, regardless of temporary applause or temporary opposition. History provides countless examples of men and women who achieved extraordinary results because they continued long enough for their vision to become reality. In nearly every case, there were periods when the evidence seemed to contradict their belief. There were periods when the evidence seemed to contradict their belief. There were months when progress appeared invisible. There were seasons when effort seemed disconnected from reward. Yet they continued, not because they possessed certainty about the outcome, because they possessed certainty about the process. They had learned a truth that experience teaches better than words ever can. The process, faithfully followed, eventually produces results that cannot be predicted from any single day of effort. A seed does not reveal its future on the day it is planted. A habit does not reveal its power on the day it begins. A purpose does not reveal its full influence on the day it is written. Growth takes place beneath the surface, influence on the day it is written. Growth takes place beneath the surface long before it becomes visible. This is why patience is not passive. Patience is active trust in a process that has not yet completed its work. It is the willingness to continue investing effort when the final outcome remains unseen. Most people overestimate what can be accomplished in a week and underestimate what can be accomplished in a year. They seek dramatic evidence too soon and become discouraged when it fails to appear. Meanwhile, the patient individual continues laying one stone upon another, building a foundation that eventually supports achievements that seem sudden to outside observers. But nothing about them is sudden. The promotion appears sudden only because no one saw the years of preparation. The successful business appears sudden only because no one witnessed the countless improvements made before recognition arrived. The transformation appears sudden only because few people pay attention to the invisible disciplines that precede visible success. You are now in possession of those disciplines. The question is no longer whether they work. The question is whether they will be applied consistently enough to reveal their power. The next 90 days will pass regardless of your decision. The next year will pass regardless of your decision. The future version of yourself is being created either way. Every thought contributes. Every habit contributes. Every action contributes. The only real choice is whether that creation will occur by design or by default. Choose it deliberately. Real choice is whether that creation will occur by design or by default. Choose it deliberately. Choose the purpose before circumstances choose one for you. Choose the habit before distraction creates another. Choose the standard before convenience lowers it. Choose the future before the past repeats itself. Then continue. Continue when progress is obvious. Continue when progress is invisible. Continue when enthusiasm is high. Continue when enthusiasm is absent. Continue long enough for the new identity to become stronger than the old one. For when that happens, the struggle that once seemed permanent begins to disappear. The mind and the objective move into alignment. Effort becomes focused. Decisions become simpler. Into alignment. Effort becomes focused. Decisions become simpler. Action becomes more consistent. And the person who emerges from that process discovers something worth more than temporary success. He discovers that his greatest asset was never circumstance, talent, luck, or even opportunity. His greatest asset was always the ability to direct himself and to keep moving in the chosen direction long enough for that direction to become his destiny. And once a man understands that his destiny is shaped primarily by direction rather than speed, he stops measuring his life by short intervals. He no longer becomes discouraged because a single week failed to produce visible results. He understands that meaningful change follows a timetable far different from the impatient expectations of the average mind. A river does not carve through stone because of a single surge of force. It succeeds because it continues. Day after day, season after season, year after year, it applies pressure in the same direction until what once appeared immovable begins to yield. Character is built in exactly the same way. The strongest habits are rarely formed through dramatic effort. They are formed through repetition. A small action performed consistently acquires a power that a large action performed occasionally can never match. This is why the ordinary day acquires a power that a large action performed occasionally can never match. This is why the ordinary days matter so much. Anyone can act with enthusiasm on the day inspiration arrives. The test comes on the ordinary Tuesday afternoon when nothing feels exceptional. The test comes when there is no applause, no urgency, no visible reward. The test comes when the only reason to continue is the commitment that was made previously. Those are the moments that shape a life. A man does not reveal his character during rare moments of greatness. He reveals it in the countless small decisions that occur when no one else is paying attention. How does he respond when inconvenience appears? How does he respond when a task becomes difficult? How does he respond when progress slows? How does he respond when progress slows? How does he respond when the excitement of a new beginning has faded? The answers to those questions eventually determine far more than intelligence, education, or natural ability. For this reason, do not underestimate the value of your daily routine. Most people search for extraordinary opportunities while neglecting the ordinary behaviors that make extraordinary opportunities possible. Yet every significant achievement rests upon a foundation of seemingly simple actions repeated long enough to become reliable. The routine may appear unimpressive from the outside. Reading a purpose statement, spending time in concentrated thought, completing one additional act of service, keeping a promise. None of these actions appears remarkable in isolation. But a bridge is not remarkable because of a single beam. It becomes remarkable because thousands of individual pieces are joined together in a structure capable of carrying tremendous weight. The same is true of personal achievement. Every disciplined action becomes another beam. Every completed commitment becomes another support. Every day of consistency strengthens the structure. Then a moment arrives when opportunity places a greater load of consistency strengthens the structure. Then a moment arrives when opportunity places a greater load upon that structure. A larger responsibility appears, a larger challenge appears, a larger reward appears. Some people collapse beneath that weight. Others rise to meet it. The difference is often invisible preparation. The person who has spent months or years strengthening his habits possesses a foundation capable of supporting larger demands. What appears to others as confidence is often preparation. What appears to others as courage is often familiarity. What appears to others as extraordinary discipline is often the natural result of standards practiced repeatedly over time. This is why preparation should never be viewed as separate from achievement. Preparation is achievement in its earliest form. Every skill developed before it is needed. Every habit strengthened before it is tested. Every lesson learned before it becomes essential. All of these are forms of success that simply have not yet revealed their full value. Trust that process. Trust it especially when the results seem delayed. Many worthwhile outcomes arrive long after the effort that created them. Seeds planted in one season often become harvests in another. The connection between the two is real even when time separates them. Continue planting. Continue learning. Continue serving. Continue improving. Do these things not because immediate rewards are guaranteed, but because they place you in harmony with principles that have governed achievement for generations. The world changes, industries change, technology changes, circumstances change, but certain principles remain remarkably consistent. Purpose still directs effort. Thought still influences action. Habits still shape character. Character still influences destiny. The individual who understands these truths and applies them patiently possesses an advantage that does not depend upon trends, markets, or temporary conditions. That advantage travels with him wherever he goes. It remains when circumstances improve. It remains when circumstances decline. It remains because it has become part of who he is. And ultimately, that is the highest objective of all these practices, not merely to achieve a goal, not merely to acquire wealth, not merely to gain recognition, but to become the kind of person who can create value, maintain discipline, adapt to change, and continue growing regardless of external conditions. Such a person possesses something far more durable than success. He possesses the capacity to create it again and again. And that capacity, once fully developed, becomes a source of confidence that no setback can permanently destroy and no temporary victory can make unnecessary.